This naturally would have been the case. The corpse could not have been trusted to the shallow waters of the shore. The peculiar marks on the back and the shoulders of the victim tell of the bottom ribs of the boat. That a body was found without weight is also corroborative of the idea. If thrown from the shore, a weight would have been attached. We can only account for its absence by supposing the murderer to have neglected the precaution of supplying himself with it before pushing off. In the act of consigning the corpse to the water, he would have unquestionably have noticed his oversight, but then no remedy would have been at hand. Any risk would have been preferred to return to that accursed shore. Having rid himself of this ghastly charge, the murderer would have hastened to the city. There, at some obscure wharf, he would have leaped on land. But the boat, would he have secured it? He would have been in too great a haste for such things as securing a boat. Moreover, in fastening it to the wharf, he would have felt it as if securing evidence against himself. His natural thought would have been to cast from him, only as far as possible, all that had a connection with his crime. He would not have only fled from the wharf, but he would not have permitted the boat to remain. Assuredly, he would have cast it adrift. Let us pursue our fancies. In the morning, the wretch is stricken with unutterable horror at finding that the boat has been picked up and detained at a locality which he is in the daily habit of frequenting. At a locality, perhaps, which his duty compels him to frequent. The next night, without daring to ask for a rudder, he removes it. Now where is that rudderless boat? Let it be one of the first purposes to discover. With the first glimpse we obtain of it, the dawn of our success shall begin. This boat shall guide us with a rapidity which will surprise even ourselves, to him who employed it in the midnight of the fatal Sabbath. Corroboration will rise upon corroboration, and the murder will be traced. For reasons which we shall not specify, but which to many readers will appear obvious, we have taken the liberty of here omitting from the messages placed in our hands such portion as details of following up of an apparently slight clue obtained by Dupont. We feel it advisable only to state in brief that the result desired was brought to pass, and that the prefect fulfilled punctually, although with reluctance, the terms of his compact with the Chevalier. It will be understood that I speak of coincidences and no more. What I have said above this upon this topic must suffice. In my own heart there dwells no faith in preternature. That nature and its God are two, no man who thinks will deny. That the latter, creating the former, can, at will, control or modify it, is also unquestionable. I say, quote-unquote, at will, for the question is of will and not as the insanity of logic has assumed of power. It is not that the deity cannot modify his laws, but that we insult him in imagining a possible necessity for modification. In their origin, these laws were fashioned to embrace all contingencies which could lie in the future. with God all is now. I repeat then that I speak of these things only as coincidences. And further, in what I relate, it will be seen that between the fate of the unhappy Mary Cecilia Rogers, so far as that fate is known, and the fate of one Marie Roget, up to a certain epoch in her history, there has existed a parallel in the contemplation of those whose wonderful exactitude the reason becomes embarrassed. I say all this will be seen, but let it not for a moment be supposed that, in proceeding with the sad narrative of Marie from the epoch I just mentioned, and in tracing to its denouement from the mystery which enshrouded her, is my covert design to hint at an extension of the parallel, or even suggest that the measures adopted in the Paris for the discovery of the assassin of Grisette are measures founded in any similar ratiocination, would produce any similar effect. For in the respect of the latter branch of the supposition, it should be considered that for the trifling variation in the facts of the two cases might give rise to the most important miscalculations by diverting thoroughly the two courses of events, very much as in arithmetic, an error which, in its own individuality, may be inappreciable, produces at length, by dint of multiplication all the points of the process, a result enormously at variance with truth. And in regard to the former branch, we must not fail to hold in view that the very calculus of probabilities to which I have referred forbids all idea of the extension of the parallel, forbids it with a positiveness strong and decided just as in proportion as this parallel has already been long drawn and exact. This is one of those anomalous proportions propositions which, seemingly appealing to the thought altogether apart from the mathematical, is yet one that only the mathematician can fully entertain. Nothing, for example, is more difficult than to convince the merely general reader that the fact of sixes having been thrown twice in succession by a player of dice is sufficient cause for betting the largest odds that sixes will not be thrown in the third attempt. A suggestion to this effect is usually rejected by the intellect at once. It does not appear that the two throws which would have been completed, and which now lie absolutely in the past, can have influence upon the throw which exists only in the future. The chance for throwing sixes seems to be precisely as it was at any ordinary time, that is to say, subject only to the influence of the various other throws which may be made by the dice. And this is a reflection which appears so exceedingly obvious that the attempts to controvert it are received more frequently than with a derisive smile than with anything like respective attention. The error here involved a gross error redolent of mischief. I cannot pretend to expose within the limits assignment made present, and with this philosophical it needs no exposure. It may be sufficient to say that it forms with one of an infinite series of mistakes which arise in the path of reason through her propensity for seeking truth in detail.